Hey guys, and welcome to the Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report, the first podcast to bring you the local fishing report, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. I'm Joe Bye. I'm here with Butch Theory today, and Butch, tell me what's going on Fowl River, buddy. It is beautiful outside. Wind's kicking a little bit, but man, talk about some weather we've been having.
Yeah, man, it's been awesome. I mean, all through the weekend, we had a great weekend. It was beautiful. Just enough breeze to keep the gnats off of you. It's beautiful today. A little windy again, like you say, but I'll take it, man. Any day of the week.
Me too. Anytime I start seeing weather like this and the extended forecast like this, it gets me excited. And we got some good reports coming to you today from inshore, offshore, onshore, a little bit of everything this time of year. And this week's show is brought to you by the 6th annual Floribama Fishing Rodeo, the funnest fishing tournament on the Gulf Coast. It's going to be May 31st through June 2nd. There are over 30 categories to choose from. You can fish for everything from a blue crab to speckled trout, red snapper, swordfish. I mean, there's really anything you want in that tournament. It's a low entry fee and awesome prizes. Weigh-ins are going to be at the Floribama Old River Grill. So come join the party, folks. Visit the sponsor area. You can listen to live music, eat, and have fun. There's more info and tickets at FloribamaFishingRodeo.com. Butch, I'm excited about that.
Me too. I like to eat, and I like fun things.
Are you planning on me paying you back for that condo that you got?
I'm not sure. I'll have to check with the boss lady on that.
Okay. Maybe she'll forget. All right. Let's head on out offshore and talk to Kurt Tillman. Butch, tell me how to say Kurt's boat's name again.
I think it's the Ichthyius, isn't it?
We'll have to ask Kurt. Kurt, welcome back to the show. Now, your boat is the Ixoye, but say it for me.
Ichthyius.
Ichthyius. I like it. Bony fish, I believe is what that means.
It just means fish in Greek.
I like it.
Kurt, you do a lot of fishing offshore, a lot of grouper fishing, a lot of bottom fishing, also a lot of blue water fishing, and you've been doing a little bit of both this week. How's it been going? What's been going on out there?
The yellowfin's kind of hard to come by, but we went the extra mile this last trip, and we just ended up with one, but we run out of places to go and time to get them.
Well, how far did you end up going down the line?
We went to the end of the line when there wasn't anywhere else to go. The guy said, "How deep is it here?" I said, 8,500 foot.
Over your head, for sure.
Yeah.
What about blue water? Whereabout was that?
Just a little past Horn Mountain. The water got really pretty. It's a pile of grass out there. It's not bunched up, but you can't hardly troll in it. Not anything on top anyway. You be steadily getting grass hung up in your lines, but it's a pile of it. If it'll bunch up, it'll be fine.
Yeah, if this wind would lay and all that stuff would push up, it's like it'd be a pretty nice line out there somewhere.
Yeah, it definitely will be. I mean, because it's a tremendous amount of grass out there.
Is there a bunch of bait out there?
Yeah, it's a good bit of bait, pile of flying fish. It's about everywhere.
Blackfin showing up? Yeah,
there's plenty of blackfin. The dolphin and porpoise is so bad at Horn Mountain, you could never get even a blackfin to the side of the boat. They were eating them before you could get them up.
Dang, those things can be a pain for sure.
Kurt, I know y'all were catching a lot of blackfin. Take me through, when y'all are out there on those big floating rigs and you're targeting those blackfin, usually you're going to do that in the early morning hours with jigs. What do you like to do? How do you like to set up? Do you like to get that boat on the down current side of the rig, on the up current side of the rig? What do you look for? Do you look for a mark with your electronics?
I usually we'll just make a pass all the way around the rig and just see where they bunched up the best, and then just start jigging right there.
Where were those fish hitting? That seems like a lot of times those blackfin can be pretty deep. Were y'all getting hit, right off the bat, or were they pretty deep?
These weren't all that deep on most of the places, but with probably a 50 count or something like that, we'd drop it down that far and usually get a bite. Now the time I went before that, I mean, you didn't even have to jig. I mean, you drop it down, and by the time you count to 12, I mean, there's a fish on. You didn't have to jig it at all. They were so thick, but they weren't quite like that this time as far as the blackfin. But they got a little deeper, or less hungry, or something.
Butch and I have talked about that on here before. A lot of times the trick with those blackfin is kind of work your way down as opposed to going all the way down and trying to work your way back up. It's better to actually jig the jig down, if that makes sense. And we find we get a lot more strikes as the jig's falling than we do when it's bringing it up. Yeah. One of the other things that we see a lot of is, for whatever reason, it seems like, we'll always have butterfly jigs on and diamond jigs. And Butch, it seems like for whatever reason, any given trip, they may only hit diamond jigs or only hit the butterfly jigs, but it seems like there's always one that produces better than the other. Did you find anything like that out there, Kurt?
We were trying just a bunch of different stuff. The last trip, and that Palomar Fishing had actually gave me some jigs and just to try, and they were just a regular butterfly jig, and a bunch of, preferably like a gold one for whatever reason. It's got a big eye on it, like a eyeball, and I mean, it wasn't glittery or nothing. It was just gold. It seemed like that specific one, they would hit it faster. I don't really know.
I've always wondered what a diamond jig was. Why a blackfin, or anything really for that matter, like a diamond jig so much?
I don't know, but it's hard to beat that regular old conventional diamond jig. So
ain't no doubt. You can catch pretty much anything on a diamond jig.
About like a cedar plum.
That's exactly right.
A couple of years ago, Butch, I mean, it seemed like 2 or 3 trips in a row, the biggest tunas we caught were on diamond jigs, big yellowfins biting when we're jigging for blackfin. So you never really do know. You can't not put a diamond jig down.
Agreed.
I'm always going to have one down.
So you guys went a long way, kind of got beat up a little bit, and then you stopped on the way in and deep drop for some grouper a little bit. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, basically, in my opinion, March, April, May is probably the best month for the deep water grouper. So we stopped on the way in, and they still seemed like they was biting pretty good, and we just didn't have a lot of time after running that far out to spend a lot of time on it. We picked up a few and got on back in, but it seemed like they were still biting pretty good. I'd have liked to have had the time to put in part of a day on them anyway. I think we'd have probably done some good if we'd had a little bit more time.
For sure. Well, maybe next time, maybe you'll get some water. Maybe you'll get some calm water and get after them.
Kurt, if somebody's looking to get started with deep dropping, it's got a lot more interest in it than it has in years past. So if somebody's looking to get out and get started, give them some pointers, just some beginner pointers on areas to look for. It's not really necessarily, you just tell me, are you going to a specific set of numbers like you would when you're snapper fishing and then drifting off those numbers? Are you holding on a specific spot? Are you just kind of looking for some natural bottom to drift along when you're finding success?
I guess it just depends on what you're kind of targeting. And sometimes some of my best spots, there's nothing there. It looks like flat bottom. You see a couple little marks. It's just mud bottom down there. And I don't know why they're there. I don't really know, but it's just mud bottom. It's mud because when that weight gets hung up in there. And I catch probably the biggest ones we catch come off that bottom, and some of the best trips I've ever had has been on just flat bottom. You don't even mark anything. And most of that stuff I started fishing, and commercial fishermen kind of showed me kind of what to look for, and we just started trying to fish some of that mud bottom. It's been pretty productive. And the thing about the deep water grouper is you might find a rock and it'll probably hold some fish, but once you go to it twice, you might as well scratch it off the books till next year, because they don't come back, and it's not like there's just a ton of fish there anyway. I think you catch them all off, and until like the year passes by and like you go through the season and they move back in from deep water and move back on them spots, those spots are easy to fish out. And I think one thing people do is go back to the same spot after they catch some, thinking they're going to catch some more. And it takes a while to get up and down. So it's not like fishing inshore where you got as much time, and everything. So by the time you go to a few spots that you've already fished a few times and don't catch anything, then you just kind of run out of time. So if somebody was going to start and they found a couple good spots or look around, and I would just try to make every trip where you actually kind of looking for something new, where you have basically, I might fish 10 spots and only a couple of them's productive, so it's just having that many more spots. It's all about the spots.
Build in some prospecting time. It's interesting to hear you say that about the mud bottom. Angelo Depaola was talking about that last week with tile fish. And one of the things Angelo was saying to look for was, Butch, he was saying that on those charts, you want to look for those contour lines that are a little bit further
spread out. That's right.
Is there anything folks can look for on the charts to try to, kind of point them in the right direction? Do you feel like it's, if you say you're leaving out of Mobile Bay or Orange Beach, Gulf Shores area, do you feel like it's better over to the east, more south of Orange Beach, Gulf Shores, and south of Florida in that area, or do you feel like it's just as good? Is there a general direction?
I kind of like just going all over, but there's a lot of boats fish out of Orange Beach, and I haven't been to the east in a while. The last few times I went over there, I haven't done as good, and I've been over there. There'll be 20 boats around me fishing the same piece of bottom practically. So, right. I just think it's got more pressure a little bit more pressure on that side. So I've still managed to catch some fish over that way, but I hadn't done as good the last few years over there, and I kind of stopped going too far over there. When I get over and on the other side of the 40s, it seems gets hammered pretty good.
For sure, man. Well, that's a great report and some good information. That mud bottom kind of perplexes me. You always think to look for those big rocks or the outcroppings and the ledges and all that, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and those tile fish, if you do some research on them, generally, like if you catch one, they're kind of like prairie dogs or something. They all live like in a colony or something. So if you catch one of them, there's usually several of them around, so
yeah, that makes sense.
And if you look for with them, you out in 800 foot and just see like a little hump with some little green dots or something like that, that's where you want to drop.
You found the colony. Well, that's cool, man. We appreciate that. We're going to try and get that offshore tip from you this week. And this week's offshore tip is brought to you by the Alabama Gulf Coast Slam Fishing Tournament. It's going on now through May 18th. Daily weigh-ins from 11 to 6 at Zeke's Marina in Orange Beach and Fort Morgan Marina at Fort Morgan. No registration required for anglers fishing aboard a registered chartered vessel. Registration required for pier, bridge, surf, and jetty fishing. For more info, visit alabamagulfcoastslam.com. What you think for an offshore tip this week, Captain Kirk?
I think if you're going to go way out there and spend a time tuna fishing, try to get some good live bait. That's the tip.
Any advice on?
I caught some pokies the day before, some small pokies that I thought would be probably pretty good because I had a hard time finding like some smaller hardtails and some other stuff for bait. And they practically, catching them the day before, they just didn't make it. Maybe I had too many in the tank or something like that. But if you can go way out there and go tuna fishing, I'd try to get some live bait for sure.
Kurt,
that's great, man.
Kurt, when we were doing a lot of offshore fishing, we would take great lengths to not touch our live baits before we put them in the live well. We used D-hookers and just really tried to take good care of them. You got any tips if you're catching pogies? You're typically doing that with a cast net. What do you do once you've got a big net full of them? How do you keep from handling them and try to keep them in good shape?
I just dump them right in there if you could out of the net or whatever. It seems like if you're missing all that slime off of them, then they start dying and you practically if you overloading the tank is probably the worst thing you can do. It's just have too many of them in there.
Yeah,
and it's easy to do if you're catching something like that. And
oh yeah, you need more, but then not so much. Yeah. All right, man. Well, cool. We appreciate the report this week, and I know you've been running some charters. So if people want to get in touch with you for a charter, what's the best way they can get in touch with you?
Call me 228-1003, or I actually got a Facebook thing, Captain Kurt's Charters.
Awesome, man. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, Butch. Let's take it from offshore to inshore. Who we got next?
Yeah, man. Let's go see what old Captain Richard Rutland's doing with cold-blooded fishing. How are we doing today, Captain Richard?
I'm feeling cold-blooded. That's for daggone sure right there.
Cold-blooded. I like it.
That's it.
Is that what you say when you started drinking beer early in the afternoon?
Cold-blooded. That's right.
That's right.
Anywho, do y'all want a fishing report today, or what we talking about?
I think so, man.
Whatever you want to do. Tax return. You tell us what you're buying with your tax return or whatnot. But no, a little birdie told me that you're on a little bit of a triple tail bite. Tell me about that.
Oh man, you're not lying about that. Had a pretty good day. Late last week on some blackfish, went down in the Mississippi Sound and started running around looking at some floating structure. Believe it or not, there's a lot of debris down there right now, logs and grass mats and stuff. I think it's kind of been floating out of the delta and whatnot. There was several fish down there. We caught probably 3 or 4 that were keeper size. We put one in the box and ended up tagging 8 fish. So we had a real fun day, and that was the day to write home about. But we've had several trips here and there where it's kind of like an end of the day kind of deal, and we ran across 1 or 2 on the way back to the dock. So they're definitely starting to show up. No great big size, no great big size on any of them yet, but there's a lot of numbers out there, and that's real typical of finding them early. I guess we're like getting into late spring, early summer kind of pattern. So that's typical to find a lot of numbers and not a lot of size.
Seems like, in my experience, early in the season like this, you do seem to find them more on, what I call flotsam tide lines and like little floating things. I mean, I've seen them even laying up underneath a dead hardhead catfish before. But it seems like you'll find them more on a tide line or crab pot as opposed to maybe your channel markers and buoys. And I'm not saying that's a rule, but for some reason that's been
pilings and stuff. No,
right. And see them. I see them a lot more. I mean, they're just laying right on the top of the water a lot of times. Are you seeing those fish before you all were catching them?
Most definitely. And back to tide lines and flow sam. I think that's how they come in. I think that's how they make their way inshore from being offshore, is they find these tide lines and watercolor changes. And I feel like a lot of them live in those things while in those types of situations when they're coming into the bay. And then they find the crab traps and other floating logs and channel marker buoys and pilings and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of how they come in. So, and that's usually, we caught, I think, 3 or 4 off of one tide line in about a 1 mile stretch the other day, and I just idled along and just sit there and look at every little piece of trash and seaweed that's floating along there, and you see them and flip a live shrimp over to them, and it was game over.
There's plenty.
Really wish we were going to spend more time doing that, Joe.
Yeah, but Butch and I kind of just did a little exploring on Saturday and got out and just circumnavigated Monlouis Island and coming down.
We were with the girls. We were just kind of chilling.
This is what all guys say whenever they
they strike out. That's right.
we were just relaxing. Really, just needed to de-stress and get out on the water. We weren't fishing hard. But the Mobile Bay, was and I don't know the conditions today, but it was very muddy. There's a lot of water hyacinth, a bunch of logs in the bay, a lot of good habitat to see those fish, but it was super muddy. Going into Mississippi Sound, is the water clearing up as you get over towards the western edge of the sound, or would you say look for that change, that water change?
It's been actually getting worse. So that's the bad news for this week. I guess we'd say into late last week and early this week, I started to see the water really go bad in Mobile Bay, where anytime I was transiting, you'd see there'd be a little bit of off-color water, but I'd look in my wake and I'd see zero foam whatsoever in my wake. No froth in my wake, which told me that there was almost zero salinity in the water. And that usually makes me push to the west. And not far from the Dolphin Island Bridge, and even kind of on the north side of Dolphin Island, was holding some nice, pretty water. But it progressively got worse through the weekend and into this week. Yesterday when I fished, I saw that kind of dirty water all the way down to Katrina Cut. So, and we've had a southeast wind. It's kind of, we got a southeast wind that's kind of dug in right now, and it's going to blow that way pretty much through the weekend. And that could possibly make that worse, that east wind blowing that water that direction. The good news is that Barry steam plant, I think, is around 9 feet and falling pretty good. And it looks like by this Sunday, it's going to get down to about 4 or 5 feet. And then in the next probably 2 weeks or so, we'll really start to see that the lower part of the bay start to clean up. And the southeast wind will help that eventually, with some good tidal movement. It'll bring in some nice, pretty water and start to clean that area up. Hopefully we're going to kind of get into full-fledged spring pattern.
This, anytime May comes around, I start thinking about wade fishing. Is that starting to heat up? I mean, is it time to get out of the boat and start? It is. Start wading?
Yep, it definitely is. I waded on Sunday and Monday, and I had stellar trips both days using artificial. We were wading primarily over oyster shells and finding little troughs, stuff where you have a lot of texture on your bottom. You have like a sandbar come up to about 1.5 feet and drop down into about a 3.5 foot trough, and they'd usually be on either side of the bar in the trough. And then over the shell, you're just mainly looking for bait, looking for jumping mullet and stuff like that types of activity. But it's definitely wade fishing time. The water's still just a taste chilly. I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. When you get into that waist deep water, it's still just a taste chilly. But as the water temperature starts to come up in the next week or so, I really feel like we're going to be in a full-on spring pattern, especially with the full moon coming up in the middle of the month. It's only going to get better every day, in my opinion.
What's your go-to for wading right now? Are y'all using slick lures still, or are you needing to do something with a scented bait? What's working?
Been starting out on topwater. I had 2 guys on Sunday. They threw topwater all morning and did really, really well. And then once the sun got up pretty good, we all switched over to slicks and did real well on slicks. A lot of times with my trips, my charters, I like to use live bait. We'll take live croakers with us and use live croakers. But bait's been really hard to come by. Shrimp and croakers have been almost impossible to come by if you're not on top of the bait situation with the bait shops. So, so the slick lure has been producing real well for me.
Are you still using the weighted hooks with the wade fishing, or are you going to the unweighted?
I still stick with the weighted hooks. It's so rare that I throw an unweighted slick lure. I don't know why, but I just like that weight.
Same here.
I feel like it adds to the action of the lure a little bit more. And you can also throw it a lot farther.
I feel like it dives and dips and ducks a lot more with the weight on it.
It does. I agree with that 100%.
About that hay cap question, Joe.
The hay cap quiz this week. It's coming from Rusty Staggs. He emailed us. I like that name.
I like it.
That is a good name. I like that name a lot.
My second son, if I have one, Rusty. All right. Rusty Staggs emailed us at alabama@bestfishingreport.com. He's got a good one this week. Rusty says, what kind of rods, Richard, specifically action and power, and how many do you need to fully equip an inshore boat to cover all different types of fishing, such as popping corks, artificials, grubs, etc.? What do you think, man?
Well, first of all, I don't think there's a boat on earth that would have enough rod holders for me to put all of those rods in.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I need a different rod for every single lure I throw. But I kind of break it down like this. You go live bait, artificial, and then we're talking about bottom fishing. On live bait, I tend to like a much softer action rod. So meaning that it's not real stiff. It has a lot of give in it. The blank is going to bend all the way through the rod down to the handle. And the reason I like that is because when we're using like popping corks and then like just maybe tight line and croakers or something like that, when you have to use these little bitty hooks, and when you get the hook in the fish's mouth, the softer the action is, the more it's going to absorb the shock of the fish making long runs and shaking his head and coming to the surface. And I feel like that's definitely going to keep the hook buried, especially in a trout's mouth, better more so than like redfish or other species, because trout's mouths just have all this really soft tissue that likes to rip and tear and all that. And the more he does all the head shaking and running and stuff, the bigger the hole's going to get that the hook is in, and the more likely it is to shake out. So starting with a popping cork and a slip cork, I like a little bit longer rod, about at least a 7 foot. All of mine are 7.6, and I like that because you get you can cast it a lot farther, and you also when you go to set the hook, the rod comes around a little faster, so you get tight on the fish a little quicker. So I would say a medium to medium light on your popping cork and slip cork rod, or like a tight line rod. So medium to medium light, and then a moderate fast tip is what I would say as far as the action goes. Then when you switch over to artificial, you want something that's going to be a little bit more limber, a little stiffer, has a fast to an extra fast action. And I still stay at a medium, maybe a medium heavy power. And the reason you want that is so that you can feel everything that's going on with the lure when you're retrieving it. Sometimes these bites that you're getting, some of these fish are real light, and that having the action a little faster is going to help you feel that bite. And then when you set the hook, you're going to drive the hook into the fish's jaw or to some type of bone. So when I go like to the store and load up like the tip of a rod, I'll usually stand the rod straight up and load the tip. On an artificial rod, I want to see only about the top third of the rod bending. You don't want to see the bottom section of the rod. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And as far as length on the artificial rods, a lot of guys will go shorter than 7 foot, to like a 6'9", 6'10". Like I said, more a fast to extra fast, and that's going to be your shorter rods are going to be what you want to use maybe for a grub, where you have a nice wide gap hook. You set the hook in a fish. You don't really have to worry about them shaking off. When you start to get into throwing hard baits, top water, stuff like that, you want to go a little bit softer on those rods. You don't want those to be quite as stiff, because you're dealing with treble hooks there again, and you're running into the same thing I was talking about with live bait, where you can start to tear holes in their mouth and shake hooks loose. And as far as length, going forward with from grubs, I'm pretty much about a 7 foot to 7'3", 7'4" in length. So and then bottom fishing's the next one. I kind of think the same way about bottom fishing than I do about live baiting with my popping cork and slip cork rods. I want them soft. I want the rod to bend and absorb the pressure of the fish, so that you're not, you don't want to feel when you're catching a snapper or an amberjack or something like that. You don't want to feel like you're fighting a fish on a 2x4. I want to feel like the rod's absorbing a lot of the head shaking and running and all that kind of stuff. It seemed like back in the day, I used to use like braided line and a real stiff rod. And it seemed like I usually broke a lot of fish off that way, or pulled a lot of hooks off. And I switched over to mono and a softer rod, and it made all the difference in the world as far as getting fish off the bottom, getting them to the boat.
Funny to hear you say that. I've got a small Abbott reel that I use on a really limber rod for deep dropping, and a lot of people laugh at me because this thing just bows over. It doesn't matter what you catch, it's going to put a big bow in it. But because I've got that heavyweight braid on there, and I can crank the drag down, so I'm not really letting much line out, and the limber nature of that rod gives just enough that I'm not wearing a hole in that fish's mouth, and it works like a charm. But it's exactly opposite of what I grew up bottom fishing with, So I think with braided line, and I like what you're saying about the limber nature of the rod, giving and letting that be some of your drag, because that's important. Mm-hmm. I'm going to take this one step further though, Richard. If I'm wade fishing, I'm only carrying one rod with me. So if I'm taking one rod and I'm going to throw a top water early, and then I'm going to switch over to a slick lure, or maybe switch over to a grub, what's your all-around go-to rod if you got to take only one?
I just think about one of the rods in my arsenal right now, and it's a 7'3". Of course, I build on my own rods, so I don't have brands I can spit out there at you. But it's a 7'3", and it's a extra fast, medium power rod, and it's definitely something you can that I kind of use all purpose. It's not my most favorite rod to throw a grub with, but definitely like throwing slicks and top waters with it, because it's got enough backbone to where you get a bite on a slick lure, you can really get a good hook set in them and keep them tight. And then when you using top water early in the morning, I can back off of my drag a little bit, and has enough flex in the tip to where you're not ripping the lure out of the fish's mouth when you get him on there. It's all a balance, you know what I mean? It's kind of like the perfect boat does not exist. Everybody wants a boat, like an inshore boat, that'll run 65 miles an hour and, just blow right across Mobile Bay in a 4-foot chop and float in 12 inches of water. And that just doesn't exist, So you give up one thing for another. It's the same way with a fishing rod, there's a compromise in there that you have to live with. Sure. And a lot of that comes down to playing the fish back in too. How you set your drag and how you reel the fish in, kind of playing them in, not putting too much pressure on them, or being able to put enough pressure on them to keep them hooked up.
I like it. Yeah, I mean, you got to ask yourself, what are the 80% of the conditions that you're doing? And if funds are limited, you want to get a rod that can handle 80% of the stuff and be good at it, and then maybe be mediocre at the other 20%. You're just not doing it as much. So, man, that was right. I like that. I'm ready to come.
Yeah, I could keep on going too, man. You know me. I'm definitely into the gear. I have a rod dedicated to every type of application that I'm going to do. Now, a lot of my rods end up being multi-purpose rods, but then there's some rods I can only use for certain applications. It's only going to work for either like a top water or a popping cork, or it's only going to work for a grub situation or something like that. So there's definitely a method to the madness, I guess you'd say. And I've picked that up a lot from the bass world. The bass guys, they're that way. That's how they're programmed, and just picking up little things from them has made me a better rod builder and angler.
I like it. Well, Rusty, thanks for the question this week. Just email us back at alabama@bestfishingreport.com with your address, and we'll send you the Fairhope Rattle popping cork. Richard, thanks for the report, buddy. Stay safe out there. We will talk to you soon.
Cool, man. Y'all, thanks for having me. I'll see y'all next time.
Thanks, Richard. Keep whacking them. Man, Joe, I knew that was the perfect hey cap question for Captain Richard, because I know how much of a rod junkie he is. I was looking forward to hearing that answer.
I've always heard that he handles them pretty well, so that's definitely a good question for him.
For sure. All right, man, let's head on down to our onshore report. Let's see what's going on the east side of the bay. I bet that's where Captain Dusty Hayes has been fishing. What's going on, Captain Dusty?
Oh, not much, guys. Got off the beach a little while ago. I was out with Matthew and Scott Kennedy this morning. We had a little fun out on the beach this morning, but fishing's been great down here, especially this past week. It seems like it gets better every week, and we still got a good little while, or pretty much here on out. The surf fishing is going to be good, but we're still prime time on the Pompano. Huge numbers getting caught really everywhere. I mean, some places it's either one or the other. You might get a few fish, but they're going to have more size to them, those bigger females. And then you got other guys catching 15, 20, 25 pompano, in a 2, 3, 4 hour trip out on the beach, and really just catching good numbers, which is awesome to see. It's that time of year where, there's guys with little experience and just going out there and just catching them. And that's the beauty of it. You can go out there and have fun, and you don't have to be a professional or anything like that. The fish are just biting good. And there's a lot of variety out there right now too. I mean, yesterday morning, we had bull reds, or not bull reds, but upper slot redfish, close to 30-inch marks. We had, big black drum. We had bonnet head sharks. We had catfish. We had, not that that's a good thing. We had whiting. We had lots of pompano. I mean, everything from just that legal size to 16, 17-inch fish. And it's cool to see that, just different things. Even, we're all caught up on pompano this time of year, and that's the main goal, even, for myself and a lot of other guys. But it is cool to have that day where you're catching 5 or 6 or 7 different species and just kind of change it up and all that good stuff. But we've been using, basically fresh dead shrimp, sand fleas, and fish bites. And the sand flea fish bites itself have been working really well. Today and yesterday I used the shrimp, the pink shrimps fish bites, and they've been a good help keeping on the bait on the hook and having bait when that shrimp comes off, because the wind has been kicking the past couple of days. But it's been pretty jamming around here for sure on the beach.
Dusty, when you talk about using fish bites with fresh dead shrimp, take me through exactly how you bait that up.
Yeah, so with a fresh dead shrimp, you got obviously multiple size shrimp. You got your itty bitty guys and your big ones. All I want is enough to fill the gap in my hook. I don't want some huge gobbing piece on there the size of a golf ball. I just need just a little bit on there to fill the gap in my hook. So if it's really small shrimp, I might use the whole thing. I will take the head off that shrimp and peel it and just use the meat of that shrimp. Now, if it's a bigger shrimp, like one that's bigger than your finger, and some of them they're really big. That's 3-4 pieces of bait. I mean, you just need enough, about the size of a nickel is usually what I tell everybody. After I put that shrimp on the hook, I'll thread it on through the body. After I put that piece of shrimp on the hook, I will take a square of fish bite, usually about the size of your thumbnail. It doesn't have to be that big even. I will put it, directly through the middle of that fish bites on my hook after the shrimp. Now, once you cast out, that's kind of like your best shot is that first cast, because that fish bite is protecting that shrimp, help keeping it on the hook. Whether it's a fish or a pinfish or a crab, there's hakes, there's all kinds of stuff that wants to take that shrimp. And also the wind, when you cast into a heavy wind like we had today, that shrimp comes off a lot of times. So that fish bite helps kind of keep it on. Once that shrimp does come off, that fish bite is still there. I've seen a lot of people try to pry that stuff off and cut it off, and it just makes a mess, and it's hard to do. I'll just slide it up the hook after that and then put that shrimp on the same way as if that fish bite wasn't there. I'll just put that shrimp on top of the fish bites. And then, then again, if crabs get the shrimp off, or if it's, the wind or your cast or whatever, that fish bite is still there putting scent out and putting color, regardless if that shrimp's there or not.
I like that. I'm going to have to incorporate that in. I've always been an either or guy, haven't done the double up yet. And that's something I'm definitely going to add to my arsenal for sure. We talked with Matthew last week, and Matthew was telling us that most of his pompano bites were coming on that top drop on a set rig. Are you finding the same thing to be true? And I want to we'll talk a little bit more too about these single hook rigs using a slider type weight. Explain to me a little bit about why you would use that as opposed to a set rig.
Me personally, when it comes to this time of year, I'm not big on a Carolina rig. If it's with, areas where the sandbars are really close and there's a little current, I'll use a Carolina just to mess around, and sometimes kind of, I have that rod in my hand and I'm not casting out and letting it sit. That rod is in my hand waiting for a bite. If I'm using a Carolina rig or a slider rig, one drop to me is the way to go. That's what I do predominantly. If I do a 2-drop, it's just where I'm trying to get more scent, more color in the water. And yes, you will see that top hook is the way, not always, but things like with the pompano, especially 90% of the time it's on that top hook. And sometimes it's just with the color, you'll do different color floats, top and bottom. And sometimes they like one color better than the other. I had a color that was hot for me at the end of last week. And so I put purposely, just to see if it would change, I put the hot color on the bottom of a different rig, and they were all hitting the bottom float or the bottom hook. So, but that is right. The top hook usually seems to be the way to go. But the 1-drops and the 2-drops, they hold good, and they also cast very well. That pyramid sinker on the bottom, especially if you're casting into a wind on a rougher day, things like a bullet, it is cutting through that wind and it is carrying that bait out, versus a Carolina rig or a slider rig is going to be fighting itself. You got a bait over here and a weight over here, and they're kind of going back and forth, versus that single 1 or 2 drop rig is more in line. And I've noticed that I get a lot more distance out of a one drop rig versus a two. And you'll also use a lot more bait. With a 2-drop rig, I'll usually do a piece of shrimp and fish bites on top, and then on that bottom hook, I'll do just fish bites. If they hit it, they hit it. If they don't, they don't. But it's there with scent, and I'm not wasting as much shrimp on that bottom hook that's sitting there not catching fish, you know?
Yeah. With the single drop, how long is your leader, say, from your weight to your swivel? How long do you like that leader to be?
I would say usually around 20 inches. You know, sometimes I'll make them a little shorter if I'm trying to really cast further. I like a longer leader, and I'll say longer. I don't like it extremely long. I see some people make them, you know, half the length of the rod, especially with the 2 drops. And to me, it's kind of, it really does wear down your cast. But I've made some that are, you know, maybe 14 inches, a little 1 drop, and it'll cast like a bullet because, you know, you don't have as much. There's a lot more closer to the end of your rod when you cast. It seems to cast so much further. But most of the time, I'm not necessarily worried about distance. You know, there's not too often. It's just the windy days we get this time of year where we're really trying to bomb it. But that 1 drop, I'll, you know, usually make it a little longer, you know, sometimes around 20, even 24 inches. And then I'll actually put that top drop closer up to the top versus in the middle. I'll put it closer to the top quarter, or about 3/4 of the way up from the bottom, basically. And do that. That way it's still like it's that top float because it's still floating off the bottom. And you're just basically saving that bottom hook. It's less drag in the water. It's less drag when you cast, you know, through the air. You're able to a little further cast, and you're not wasting as much bait or hooks or tackle, you know. So that's my go-to for sure.
All right, my last rigging question, Dusty. I'm not going to ask you what your hot color was, but if one was to go to the beach and fish, what colors would you make sure you had in your arsenal?
So it's a variety, you know, and the thing about it is yeah, there's hot colors, and there's some that, you know, I would, you know, like, oh yeah, I would never tell you, but I've had people fishing next to me. Like I have a buddy that was fishing next to me a few weeks ago, and he's from Michigan. He comes down just to Pompano fish the Pomp Stomp, and he was using black floats, and he was catching a fish every 30 seconds. He caught probably 10 to my 1, and you know, nobody would ever thought black. So it's really creativity, doing what you. Just trying new things. The basics, though, orange, white, yellow, all that stuff. Chartreuse is a real popular one. You see a lot of people use, and I've seen a lot of fish get caught on chartreuse, but chartreuse and orange are the ones you see at most stores on rigs and stuff. I personally don't really use either one of them a whole lot. I use a lot of, you know, more bright like pinks and purples and stuff. You know, finding that stuff's really hard. You really got to do your research and kind of go around and find, but just experiment. I wouldn't spend any one time on one color, especially if you're not catching fish. You know, if you go to a tackle store and you see something green or what, you know, just something different that you don't have, you know, pick them up. You can usually get a thing of floats for a couple bucks and just have them in your arsenal. At some point, you know, they may not catch fish for you for 6 months, but at some point, those floats will catch a fish for you, whether you think they would or not. I mean, you know, I watched a guy the other day using Fire Tiger walleye floats, and he was getting smoked. I mean, just as much as I was. So it's just a matter of just trying things out and experimenting.
Butch, how many times have we been in blue water and it's like you're chunking and you get a bite and then that turns off and you go to the kite and then you get a bite there and then you go throw the popper and you get a bite there. And it almost seems like a lot of times fish just want a little, just it's almost like a reaction thing when they see something different.
Yep, I agree.
Or you've been trolling the same rip and you put something new in the spread and bam, immediate, you know?
Yep, all the time.
Well, one more thing I've always told people on colors is if you know, while you're fishing, take a minute and walk, you know, 50 yards and look down at the shoreline and look at all the colors you see in those shells, you know, and really pay attention. You know, don't just be dull about it. You know, pick up those little coquina clams or periwinkles, whatever you want to call them, and say, okay, I see yellow. I see black on the inside, you know, right there at the pit. I see purple in there. I see kind of a red color in there. I see some orange, you know, ghost shrimp eggs are orange. Sand flea eggs are orange. I mean, there's just so many different colors that you'd never think about that are right there in the shoreline. And that's like with the black the other day. I mean, if you walk up and down the beach, you see all the little clam shells and stuff that are black. I was like, you know, I never even thought about that.
Yeah, I thought the same exact thing whenever you said that he was using black. I was like, well, there is a ton of stuff in the sand that are black.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no telling what they're eating that we don't know about. I mean, it could be like a little crab or something that we don't know about that's a forage for them. And sure. It's another thing you look at when you always look at the insides of a fish. Sometimes I kind of know what the fish are eating, like redfish on Dixie Bar or something. They're eating pogies and mullet stuff or whatever they can find, really. But like, especially if I'm pompano fishing or if it's the off season and I'm not catching a lot, and I do catch one and I keep it and clean it, I'm always going to look at the contents of their stomach and see, or their intestines, and go, okay, this guy's eating sand fleas all day, every day. Or, we might have 4 pompano and they're all slap full of sand fleas. So they're all slap full of these little clams crushed up. But if you look at pompano, 9 times out of 10, they have this ground. It's like sand and clams and stuff just kind of ground up in there. And it's always got a real dark, black, brown color to it. So it might just be a darker shade that they relate to. There's all kinds of ways you can go about it. There's really no perfect one. I'd say pink is my favorite, but I haven't figured out what the hell pink looks like yet in the surf.
Well, and then when it's on the bottom, what does it even look like underwater? Because it changes color, so who knows? But sounds like what you're saying, Dusty, is taste the rainbow. But Butch, we're going to get this onshore tip from Dusty this week. Who's bringing it to us?
It's going to be Killer Doc, man. You saw mine, didn't you?
I did. You got all set up. You got enhanced. I knew you needed it.
I did. I needed it, man. I just didn't realize, I didn't realize how bad it was. I was cleaning fish on the back of my truck on my tailgate before I got this thing.
Quite an enhancement for you. Have you got a chance to test it out? I know catching fish too clean can be a bit of a challenge for you.
For sure. I have been fishing and caught fish since I had it installed, but we released them all. So
is it released? I like that. I like how you said you released them.
We did.
Usually,
we were sportsmen that day.
I hope you get a chance to break it in. It is quite an upgrade to your dock experience there.
It is, man. It's
yours is black powder coat, right?
It is. I got the. I think it's the upscale. I think is what they're calling it now. They have a couple new different names for them.
Yeah, there's quite a few different models. Where can you check them out?
Yeah, man. Just visit them at killerdoc.com or check out them on Facebook at Killer Doc.
Dock enhancement. Dusty, what you thinking about a little surf fishing enhancement this week?
One thing that I've noticed so many people try to, or not try, but really go wrong in surf fishing is telling their bite, and a lot of people, especially if you're new to it, you watch that rod, every little tick, everybody thinks it's a bite. And when you do finally get a bite and you see that rod just doubled over and you're like, okay, that's a fish. I know that. And that's almost something anybody can tell. But when you get a bite, sometimes, especially with a pompano, they will run at you. And that rod will stand straight up and that line will lay slant down, just almost down to the ground some days. That is usually a fish. I mean, I would say half those fish when they do that are caught, depending on how quickly you see that and how quickly you react. But when you see that, that is a fish, and a lot of times this is a pompano, especially this time of year. Those fish will hit it, they'll run right to you, and they put a lot of slack in your line. And all the bigger ones I've ever caught have done that to me. First thing you want to do is get to that reel and start reeling before you do anything. You just want that slack coming out of that line as fast as you can, and you want to keep that rod up. You don't want to point that rod at them. That's a bad habit of a lot of people. They'll pick that rod up and out of a sand spike, and they point it right at the fish. You want to, especially if that line's tight, but you want to get that slack out of there as fast as possible and get connected with that fish so that hook can get set. Whether you use circle hooks or tail hooks and you set the hook or you don't, that's a whole other thing, but you want to get that slack as quick as possible. So that's something you really got to pay attention to. I see guys sitting there in their chairs and they're on their phone, drinking their coffee and, talking to some person walking down the beach, and their line will be laid down, washed up on the beach. And, you'll miss a lot of fish doing that. Yesterday, there was a lot of little small whiting up close, and they would hit it and put slack in it, and I couldn't see it because it was on 10-pound braid, and I was, 30 yards away, and by the time I saw my line laying down there, the fish would be gone. So you really got to look for that, especially with the big pompano, because I guarantee you've almost everyone that's ever surf fished has missed a few fish by not paying attention for that.
That's a great tip, Dusty.
Yep, I like it too.
Well, thanks for the report this week, buddy. If folks want to get in touch with you, how can they do it?
Yeah, guys, you can give me a shout at 678-897-0167. And then I also have for my surf fish guiding page, it's Shore Thing Fishing, ShoreThing, Shore Thing Fishing, and that's all my surf guiding stuff. And inshore, Liquid Force, inshore charters. on Facebook and Instagram. So,
Excellent, buddy. All right. Good luck out there. We'll talk to you soon.
all right, guys. Thank y'all.
All right, Joe. You got me feeling bad. I'm going to have to try out my my Killer Doc cleaning table this weekend. Have to put some blood on it for you.
Are you just going to go like buy some crawfish or something and eat them on it?
I was thinking shrimp, but either way.
Yeah, just whatever. Just so you get some use out of it at least, you know.
That's right. All right, man. That's another good Alabama saltwater fishing report. What did you learn this week?
Man, the thing that stuck out to me was a good report all around and some good tips. But the thing that really stuck out to me was Richard Rutland talking about, selecting the right action rod for the type of, not only the type of fish you're catching, but the type of lure that you're throwing. Mm-hmm. And how having a rod that's a little bit too stiff can lead to wearing a bigger hole in a fish's mouth, which is going to equate to losing more fish.
Mm-hmm.
And what that really reminds me of and makes me think about is, you and I saw this for years and years and years, and I don't care how long you fish, you're going to screw this up again at some point in the future. But number one, the minute you grab a rod and reel, first thing you ought to do is check the drag, just as a matter of habit. And if you're fishing for really big fish, you better be testing the drags, not just pulling it with your hand, but you better actually be putting them on a scale.
Knowing exactly what you're pulling.
Exactly. I like to set my drags at about a third of my weakest point in the line. So, for example, if I've got a 50-pound main line and a 50-pound leader, and let's just assume my knot is 100% breaking strength, I've got a 50-pound line. I want my drag to be at 15 to 17 pounds to feel comfortable with that. Mm-hmm. And I think guys, myself included, set their drags way too dang tight. And I also think that people are not realizing the effect that their rod has on drag and the effect that their line, not their line coming out of the reel, but their line dragging in the water has on their drag. And it's causing people to lose a lot of fish. So and that kind of plays into what Dusty said. When that pompano hits and he runs straight in, he's putting a big belly in that line. This happens all the time with blue marlin and tuna. If you don't keep that line tight, it's not just about keeping the line tight so the hook doesn't come out. It's about keeping the line tight so you have an actual drag system instead of just whatever drag that line is, whatever pressure the water is putting on that line. So I guess just the thing that sticks out to me is check your dadgum drag and don't be scared to let a fish run a little bit. That's what's going to lead to number one, it's going to be more fun, but it's not going to wear those holes in their mouth like Richard talked about.
Well, that's what the drag's for.
Profound.
Yeah. No, man, you're right. I've seen a lot of people lose a lot of fish. I lost a big fish fishing this weekend on a slick lure. First, I was like, I'm just going to throw a slick. Just kind of in the middle of fishing. We saw a bunch of redfish tailing up against the bank and some marsh and some grass on the bottom, and I chunked it up in there, and as soon as it hit the water, it must have landed on his head, and he smoked it. And my drag was too loose. I think my drag was too loose. I did not get a good hook set. Lost him. I was pretty sad.
A good test is, and we used to see this all the time bottom fishing, is guy hooks a nice fish, and the first thing he does is he takes it out from underneath his armpit, and he puts the butt of that rod in at his belt buckle, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe he's got a gimbal on, he puts it in a gimbal. That fish is directly straight down.
Right.
That rod tip, now the rod tip is sticking almost straight vertical in the air. And a good test is to do this. Go out, grab your favorite bottom rod, and set it parallel to the ground. And have someone pull on it, or you have someone hold it and you pull on it. Pull on it and feel how the drag works, okay? Then have that person stick that rod up at a 45-degree angle and pull straight
like it's in your gimbal, right?
Exactly, and pull straight down on it, and you will feel the difference. You didn't change the drag at the reel. You didn't change the action of the rod. You changed the angle. And how many times do you see that guy hooks a big fish, puts it in the gimbal, pop?
Oh, it makes a big difference. There's no doubt.
It's a huge difference. It's a huge deal.
It is.
All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up this week. We appreciate you guys subscribing, rating, and reviewing wherever you listen to podcasts. We are wherever you listen to podcasts, so we appreciate the support. If you would like us to email you the podcast each week, just head over to greatdaysoutdoors.com/ASFR, and we'll send you the new show each week. Y'all keep whacking them.
This week's Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report has been brought to you by Geico. Call Ron Davis, Geico agent, at 251-445-0053 or visit him online at geico.com/mobile-al.
This week's Saltwater Fishing Report is brought to you by Angelo Depaola, the Coastal Connection with EXP Realty, your boating and beach property specialist. Check me out on Facebook at Angelo Depaola Realtor, the Coastal Connection, or call me direct at 850-287-3440.
Also brought to you by Coastal Conservation Association of Alabama. Check them out at CCAAlabama.org.
And also Great Days Outdoors, the South's finest hunting and fishing magazine. Pick up your copy wherever magazines are sold or check them out at greatdaysoutdoors.com.
This is Captain Richard Rutland, and this report is brought to you by Cold Blooded Fishing. You can find us at www.coldbloodedfishing.com.
This week's Saltwater Fishing Report brought to you by Kurt Tillman with Captain Kurt's Charters. Look me up on Facebook or call me at 228-1003, specializing in deep sea fishing. Just come catch some fish.